Built Better, the podcast for home improvement contractors by Modernize Home Services.
One of the things I was interested in when this popped up on my schedule here in my research was just the scale of the total addressable market for these types of devices.
Yeah,
I'm guessing that is what pushed you into this product category versus the other addressable markets that you were looking at.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, as I said, kind of 2010, 2025 bookending the baby boomer, kind of the catalyst that we see in the US. And it's not just a US problem. We obviously have decided to focus at this point exclusively on the US market because it's its own beast. I mean, it's a huge market. There's a lot of friction in the market in the healthcare space. And one area where we differed, and we deliberately did this, focus differently from many of the medical alert companies, is focusing almost primarily or exclusively on managed care. We do sell to consumers. They can pay out of pocket for our services. We don't focus on it as a marketing channel. Our 98% of our business is managed care insurance. So that's Medicaid, Medicare, Advantage. And so I think that we saw those demographics kind of like I was saying, with Obamacare being one of those catalysts for dramatic expansion of coverage. We saw that as kind of the first catalyst, and now kind of many years later, you're seeing that only grow. I mean, and regardless of your politics on this, what's happening now with new legislation is you're going to see a dramatic increase in funding for what we call waiver programs and other programs that are designed to keep members living longer at home. And then COVID on top of that, it's interesting because I know certain industries have obviously been horribly impacted by COVID in a negative sense, restaurants, hospitality, and it's tragic what's happened there. For a company like us, you hate to say that it's the thing that kind of moves you forward, but I think we see that in a positive light, is that there's a lot of member needs that are no longer able to be satisfied in kind of the in-person setting. And so that really lends itself well to companies like us kind of utilizing add-on services. And I can speak about some of the things that we've really kind of embraced beyond kind of the traditional technology that we had put into the market, but that were kind of a response to COVID that I think you're going to see a dramatic rise in the years ahead. So.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in digging a little deeper to the go-to-market strategy with the managed care aspect of how your product is issued, I guess, to the end user, right?
Yeah.
So, and kind of going back to the TAM, right, the total addressable market here. Typically, what's the uptake for if somebody's on Medicare, right? How do they get to interact with or get to be the end user of your product through Medicare? Like, what's the process like, and how do you sell into Medicare, right?
Yeah, so obviously there's a distinction between Medicare, Medicaid, and the plans we primarily work with are privately managed Medicaid and Medicare Advantage plans, and so they're getting a premium from the state, and the state, because of how Obamacare has subsidized Medicare, Medicaid. At least for the first 10 years, almost all of that funding was federal funding for these programs. So premiums are essentially being subsidized to these privately managed companies. Then they manage the services. And then there's certain ratios. And they have to obviously comply with a lot of regulations about how much is put towards services for members. I don't want to get into all the industry jargon and acronyms, which, I think healthcare folks love to kind of tout their acronyms. But I will say that the way it gets into people's hands is typically through an assessment. So the assessment happens, nurses go into members' homes, they do an assessment, they essentially evaluate what services members need. This is true on Medicare and Medicare Advantage. Among those services, one of the services that's often featured is personal emergency response services. And so kind of thinking about that, when we were kind of looking at the space, a big proposition that we made to the insurance plans was, okay, you're already referring services like these, medical alerts, people press their button to get help. Well, what if, given that your incentives are to keep them out of the nursing home, keep them out of the hospital, you pay the same amount for our services or a similar amount, and we'll help provide you with more proactive information to keep these people at home. And we'll share that information with the case manager and the nurse, and so when you're doing your visits, before you do your visit, you'll know information about what's happening with your member. And it turned out that care managers love this. They absolutely were like, you know what, more information in this regard is better. And obviously there's a kind of a limit to how much data and information you provide. But I think that the use cases we started to establish, they really found helpful. And I think the parameters that we were looking at, so aside from the 2-way emergency response, which we provide, we have a call center. People, if they need emergency services, they can always go there. The fact is, not everybody needs to go to the emergency room when they press the button. And then there's people who do need urgent attention when they don't press the button. And I think we were very interested in addressing all of these use cases. And so the things we really focused on early were activity, sleep, and compliance. So is the person wearing or not wearing their device, activity levels and sleep levels. And we were really not interested in activity and sleep the way that, say, a Fitbit is tracking it, which is just kind of giving you a measure of steps, a crude measure of steps, or your sleep quality, which we didn't see that as something that would be useful to our demographic. What we were really focused on was anomaly detection. And this was actually where my CTO's expertise came in extremely handy, was essentially being able to monitor activity and sleep power efficiently. So if you think about a lot of the devices on the market, after a day or a couple of weeks at that time, if you're using that device continuously, you have to recharge it. We saw that as a huge problem from a usability perspective, and we shared that with the market, with the nurses and the insurance plans we were working with. Is that what we've solved is the battery problem? You don't have to recharge our devices. We were monitoring every minute of the day, just basic patterns, very crude patterns of behavior. And we're not trying to be intrusive. What we do with that data is we say, okay, if we see something that's off the baseline, we do we trigger an outreach call. So our team will actually do outreach to the member. And so what we have is these two components. You have a trigger and you have outreach. And, it's so simple, but it's so important. And I think that was what was missing in the medical alert market. And it's what our clients really valued, is that, well, yeah, we want to know if something's happening in the member's sleep or their activity, then, we want to know about that. And we have a lot of really great examples of how, in the market now, this happens on a regular basis where, issues that are health related or non-health related, our system is able to kind of proactively trigger alerts that allow us to then follow up. And then, sometimes the member doesn't need help, but oftentimes it's kind of an invitation to a conversation where it can yield very valuable information for any caregiver, whether it's a family member or a nurse. And I think that's why we were able to penetrate the managed care space very successfully, is that we said, look, we're not going to dramatically increase the cost for you. In fact, in many cases, we're lower priced than some of our competitors. But what we will do is we'll be able to add all these additional services for you and for your member that you value. And I think they were like, well, that's a no-brainer. Why would we go with the other guys that are essentially kind of offering the one option of you do nothing or you go to the emergency room?